hope you're all doing really well, and welcome back to part 5 of this tutorial of a little robin. Also welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I'm Becca. I'm a professional pet portrait and wildlife artist specialising in realistic colour pencil drawings of animals. So we've been working our way through this little robin tutorial. We've pretty much nearly finished. We've just got the branch that it sort of sat on to finish. We've got its little feet and we've got the tail as well at the end. Most of this is kind of out of focus, so in terms of detail there's not going to be as much as we've achieved in all of these gorgeous feathers, sort of on the redbreast area, around the face and down the wing. It's kind of going to be more like this area here, so where the colours sort of bleed into each other. They're not perfectly, you know, really crisp lines, they're kind of blurred. So we're going to be using some of those same techniques that I used here to achieve that sort of out of focus blurred effect. But I'm going to start firstly by drawing the branch and the little feet as well. I'm going to move my camera in a minute so you can see the whole thing. But yeah, so obviously the branch is a completely different texture again to feathers. But to be honest, I think it'll be a little bit more straightforward because we've not got all these overlapping different textures going on. We don't have to break it down into so many tiny little shapes. It's very much blurred and it's just simply about tonal value and then creating a little bit of a textured surface in some areas, especially like around the feet where it's slightly more in focus, so we can see a bit of that surface texture detail. But yeah, so I'm going to make a start then. So I'm just going to move my camera out a little bit so you can see everything. Okay, so I've zoomed out slightly, so you should now be able to see all of the branch and the feet from the top to the bottom, hopefully. I know it's like quite zoomed out because I wanted to get everything in so you can see what I'm working on as a whole. So what I'm going to do first is go in with any normal eraser and just sort of erase those outlines as much as I can. Also the ones around the feet as well, because we don't really want to be seeing any of those initial outlines underneath our drawing. So that's step one, just making your initial outlines a little bit fainter if you can. That's a little bit better. I can still see the outlines, but they're not as prominent. So what I'm going to do first is pick out the palest colour that I can see in the reference photo when looking at the branch. I've got my reference photo here on my iPad. If I just zoom in so you can see a little bit in the camera. So we've got this really like pale yellowy colour here. So the perfect colour to use would be the Buff Titanium Luminance pencil, which is like a really, really pale yellowy colour, like a creamy colour. And what I'm going to do is literally use this throughout the entirety of the branch. And just add this all over. You also want to release your pressure slightly at either end of the branch so it kind of fades off. If you didn't want to do that and you wanted to draw right up to the edge of the paper, then you can do. But what I would do is recommend using a little bit of masking tape along the bottom edge and along the side to get that really nice crisp line. I never really like drawing right up to the edge of the paper. I always leave a tiny little bit of a gap and put some masking tape there because I think it just looks a lot more professional and clean when you take that off and have that lovely crisp line at the end. But yeah, so I'm doing kind of small circular motions with a light to medium pressure and just filling in the entirety of the branch. You also want to shade around these feet as well. I desperately need to do another pencil order. I'm literally working with stubs, so I definitely need to put in a new pencil order. It's amazing how quickly you kind of work and go through your pencils when working on, you know, commission after commission, which I have been doing recently just to get them all finished in time for Christmas. But yeah, especially luminance pencils because they're a lot softer. I think they tend to not last as long as the polychromos. So yeah, definitely need to put a new pencil order in and get some of the ones that I use all the time. This is definitely one of those pencils I use all the time. you know, as a base layer more than anything else for like brown fur, like blonde coloured fur. I use it a lot for white. Yeah, it's kind of one of them colours that you will always use, so I definitely recommend this colour if you maybe don't have any luminance pencils and you're wondering which ones to buy or to start off with. There's always 8 that I recommend, and this is definitely one of them, the Buff Titanium luminance pencil. I'd also recommend the pink white luminance pencil, the silver grey luminance pencil. Those 3 are like perfect for base layers and for blending. I'd also recommend more neutral tones like the raw umber 10%, the sepia 10%, the French grey 30%, and the warm earth 40%. They are all incredible for blending, for building up tonal value. They're just like them colours that kind of bring everything together. And the polychromos don't really have anything close to them either. I think, you know, they're kind of earthy, really lovely neutral tones that are kind of in their own right. So yeah, they're probably the main colours that I'd recommend. I'm trying to think of anything else. Also the olive brown 10% is a good one to have as well. It's slightly darker than this Buff Titanium, more of like a yellowy, like a darker yellow kind of cream colour. But yeah, I always get asked if I ever buy the sets of pencils, and to be honest, I never have done. I've just kind of built up my pencil range, like my range of pencils over the past however many years of drawing, and I've always bought my pencils individually, sort of as and when I need them. I don't know if that's the most kind of cost effective, but for me it works because I can order multiple of the same colour that I know I'm going to be using a lot of going forward. Whereas I think when you buy sets, although it might be cheaper, there's a lot of colours that you might not necessarily ever use. And I think you could, you know, spend some of that money on either multiple of the same colour that you know that you're going to use, or kind of neutral, warm, brown tones that you know that you're always going to use when it comes to fur and like animals and wildlife. But it's up to you really. I think, you know, definitely try those 8 luminance pencils that I've recommended. They are honestly the best. I don't know how I didn't use them before. I definitely started out using just polychromos and then sort of expanded to luminance pencils, and I actually think they work so well together. But yeah, it's good to kind of try these out for yourself really, because it all depends on how like heavy-handed you are when you're drawing, like how naturally soft or like hard you are when it comes to drawing, as to what kind of pencils suit you and your drawing style. But yeah, so I've added an even coverage of that Buff Titanium all through the branch like that. I've added an even coverage by using quite a blunt pencil and just kind of doing small circular motions, going over the same areas a couple of times until the whole thing is evenly covered, fading it off at either end. So I'm going to go in now with one of those luminance pencil colours that I've just mentioned, the Raw Umber 10%. This is like a beige off-white kind of creamy colour, and I'm going to use this mainly on the lower half of the branch, which is predominantly in the shadows, just to kind of build up a little bit of that shadow, those darker areas. And yeah, just kind of map out where all those shadows kind of go up to. It's very bright at the top of the branch because the light's hitting it from above. So underneath, it's very much in the shadow. So that's where I'm going to start, by just going along this sort of bottom edge all the way along. And then you just want to fill in or shade kind of halfway across the branch and fade it off. So using a medium pressure to start off with, and then release it as you get to the middle of the branch. Sort of shading around the feet as well if you can do. So I'm not doing it all in one long straight line. I'm kind of doing it in different sections. And it kind of shows how the branch is formed as well. It's got loads of these little ridges going across it anyway. So it's going to start to kind of add to that texture by sort of shading in this way. Maybe take it slightly over halfway in some areas. Like this area here in between the feet is still quite dark on the opposite side. So I'm just filling that in. So you might think I'm a bit nuts, but what I'm going to do is just rotate my piece that I'm working on to like this, because I think it'll just make it a little bit easier to draw actually. Sometimes with commissions I actually turn them upside down, especially when working on commissions that are quite large scale. If I'm doing like a huge dog portrait, I'll often work on it on its side or upside down. Firstly because it'll fit on my drawing board slightly better if I have it, you know, sideways or whatever, so it's not hanging off. But also it kind of gives you a fresh pair of eyes, like a different perspective when you're looking at something. So sometimes it's quite good to do that. So what I'm going to do is just rotate my reference photo so I'm looking at the same image at the right angle. Okay, so I've rotated my drawing and I've zoomed in, so hopefully you can see the branch a little bit better now. It just fits in the frame of the camera a little bit better, I think, this way. And I'll also change the reference photo up here so it's the same angle. So what I'm going to do next is go in with the Beastry Polychromo, which is like a light brown kind of blondie colour, and work from the bottom again up to about halfway with a medium pressure. I'm using the flat side of my pencil to get that really soft line and even coverage throughout. And again, I'm kind of shading in sections. So darkening this little bit in between the feet. So I've just gone over the same areas again, just to add a few more layers just to build up that colour a little bit more. Like that. Next up I'm going to go in with the warm grey one, which is quite a pale sort of neutral tone. I'm going to work this right up to the top edge here. Now this should firstly help to just bring everything together and blend a little bit more, so we don't have as much of this grainy texture that it's picking up. And it should just slightly dull down where the light's directly hitting the branch. Obviously it's not bright white and it's not like a really pale yellow like the buff titanium, it's just slightly darker. I'm just using this warm grey one quite lightly to achieve that colour. Add some more like neutral beigey tones in and amongst the branch. I'm using this with a medium pressure, kind of working through the bottom, bringing it up to the top, just helping it to blend. Now we don't want to completely squash down all of the tooth of the paper, so don't press down too hard so we can't see any of that grainy texture. We still want a little bit to be showing because that's what's going to help to grip onto the colours that we add on top. If we completely squash down the tooth of the paper at this stage, it'll be hard for the paper to kind of grip onto any more layers. And we've still got quite a long way to go in terms of building up that colour and that shadow, and we still want those details at the end in some areas like down here. So yeah, just press down with like a medium pressure to help to blend, but not necessarily to completely squash down the tooth of the paper. And then fade that off at either end of your branch. Like that. Next up I'm actually going to add a little bit of the olive brown at 50%, which has a slight greeny tint to it. We've used this quite a lot in the wing up here and parts of the feathers around here to create like a greeny, like khaki green but still quite neutral colour. And that might be potentially because the light is kind of reflecting the colour off the branch back onto the feathers. So the colour's kind of bouncing off the branch, going onto the feathers. So yeah, I just want to incorporate this again on like the lower half of the branch, everywhere where it looks a little bit green. So we've got that subtle like earthy tone in and amongst the branch without it being too kind of overpowering. Again, I'm applying it in the same way, so starting off at the bottom and just building up that shadow and tonal value in sections like this. I'm shading back and forth. I'm trying my best to shade around the feet. Oh, hello, Bella. She always comes in when I'm filming. Got a little red cockapoo called Bella, and she literally stays with me all the time throughout the day, but sometimes she pitter-patters around during filming. So if you can hear any of that, that's her, not me. Like that. So hopefully you can see, you know, the subtleness of that colour. It's not like a bright green, it's like an earthy green, but still, you know, so neutral. Like literally the perfect colour really for what we're trying to achieve in this branch. So I'm going to leave that there with the olive brown 50%. Next up I'm going to go in with the shade Nugget, which is a Faber-Castell pencil. I'm actually going to go in with the watercolour pencil because again I don't have any more of the polychromos left, I don't think. I can't seem to find any anyway. And I'm still yet to do a new pencil order, which I've still not done. So yeah, the Nugget watercolour pencil and the polychromo are the exact same colour. It's just a slightly different, like it feels slightly different to work with. But either or is fine. So I'm going to apply this in the same sort of area, so starting on the bottom half of the branch, taking it up to about the middle section, and again just applying it with short back and forth motions, leaving a bit of a gap and then doing the same thing all the way along the branch. So we're starting to kind of show those formations within the branch as well and how it's kind of going over. And we've got like a little bit of a, are they called knots? I'm not quite sure. In this branch here, like a little bit of a something. I don't know what to call it. We'll call it a knot. I think that's what they're called. Basically like a little thing that kind of sticks out. So you can start mapping out more of the shapes and formations with this colour as it's slightly darker than what we've used so far. So in this section here in between the feet, I'm just applying a slightly harder pressure right in the middle because it seems to be a little bit darker in the middle here. So really pick out those light and dark areas as much as you can. As a little bit of an undertone, I'm going to go in with the green gold polychromo. Now this is a really, really vibrant, like a dark gold. And in between the feet, in the lower area of the branch, you want to apply a light to medium pressured layer just into that area. It's going to give the branch a little bit of that glow where the light is kind of illuminating certain colours within the branch. And then you want to do a little bit at either side of the feet as well. And then it's not really anywhere else, to be honest, just in this area. So I'm going to leave that there with the green gold. I think I'm briefly just going to go back in with the Raw Umber 10% Luminance pencil. Just add a little bit to the top of the branch, like the sort of middle to the top, just again to help to blend that out a little bit more. No more than that, I'd say. And then you want to go in with the Van Dyke Brown Polychromo, which is like a chocolatey brown, but it's still fairly light, but it's the darkest colour that we've used so far. So this is where we can really start building up more of the shadow and those kind of dark tones within the branch, starting along that bottom edge again. Now you want the bottom edge to be really, really crisp, especially sort of about halfway down or halfway across to that first foot and maybe to the next foot as well. But anything towards the left hand side of that, like the top of the branch, it's a lot more out of focus. So if you've got a slight like kind of bleed, or it's not a perfect straight line or perfect like crisp line rather, then that's actually going to add to that out of focus effect. So yeah, just keep it really crisp, sort of halfway down, and then just build up that shadow a little bit more above. Again, you want to work in little sections to build up that sort of surface texture and formation of the branch. It's kind of made up of loads of tiny little shapes and squiggles that become more blurred and sort of softer the further up the branch we get. I find doing literally like random squiggly motions like this, kind of overlapping, really does help to build up that surface texture of like bark on the branch, or just that sort of rigid, rough texture. To the lighter sections of the branch, especially up here, I'm going to add a little bit of the olive brown 10%. And this is actually one of those 8 colours I recommended earlier on. If you've never bought any luminance pencils before, this is a really good colour to have. So I'm just going to work that into the top half of the branch. But also so good for blending, that you can see already how much it's reducing that grainy texture without me even applying like a hard pressure at all, because they're so sort of soft and waxy. They're really good for blending. And then just fade it off at either end. I'm going to go back in briefly with the olive brown 50% just to bring some of those subtle earthy green tones back up to the surface, sort of in the middle, and focusing more on the lower half of the branch. I'm going to use a really sharp walnut brown. This is much darker than that Van Dyke brown that we used just before. So again, you want to use this to intensify those dark shadows. Focusing on all the darkest little bits of the branch, just building them up even more. And at this point, you'll probably need to apply like a medium to hard pressure. We've kind of squashed down the tooth of the paper in some areas now, so it's a little bit more difficult for it to grip onto any more pigment, so you will need to really press down quite hard in certain areas to still get it to show up well. Just lightly defining the top of the branch there. And then carrying on with all these like darker little squiggly details to build up that surface texture and shadow. Next up, I'm going to go in with the Raw Umber Luminance pencil. This again has like a darker earthy green tint to it. So just focusing on those shadowy areas and bits of detail, predominantly around this area, that the details are a bit more kind of crisp, and you can see those individual lines. Up here they're a little bit more blurred, so you want to be softer with how you're applying those lines and details and marks. Use more of like the flat side of your pencil to get a softer line, whereas down here you can use more of the pointy side. that's added a really subtle, like earthy green tint to those shadowy areas of the branch, which is quite nice. I think I'm just going to add a little bit more of that green gold, run that through more of the left hand side of the branch, just to illuminate some of those colours a little bit more. Right, nothing more than that. In terms of those dark shadows and details, I'm just going to finish off with the dark sepia, which is a really dark brown polychromo. I'm just applying this to the darkest areas of the branch to really intensify those shadows and details. Also just going to add a tiny little bit of the shade sanguine. I can never say this colour, but just to the left hand side, just as like a bit of a glaze over the top, not right up to the top, more in like the shadows in the middle section. Just run that through over all those colours with a light to medium pressure to give it a slight but subtle orange tint. And anywhere else in the branch that needs it. Next up I'm going to go in with the Burnt Sienna 50%. This is a really warm sort of deep pink. Now when looking at the branch, pink doesn't immediately kind of stand out as an obvious colour, but there is a little bit of like a warmer pinky undertone there. So I'm just going to add this over the top to create that pinky like warm toned element in certain areas of the branch without it being too overpowering. Because we've added quite a lot of layers now at this point anyway, it shouldn't transfer on, you know, really pink. It's going to mix with all those darker, more neutral colours underneath. So just a little bit throughout. like that. So it's just added a really subtle, like warm pink tone to areas of the branch. I'm going to also just add a little bit of the brown ochre 10% to the top of the branch up here. And also around this sort of knot, obviously because it's raised above the branch, or from the branch should I say, the raised bit is kind of being hit by the light, so it's kind of illuminating this section. So I'm just making this bit a little bit brighter. And any other little subtle like little dots or squiggles that you want to kind of stand out against the branch, use this brown ochre 10% to do that. So we're starting to pull out some of that highlighted texture now. So to do that even more so, I'm going to go in with the craft knife slice tool just to finish off pulling out all those highlights. You can get some super fine details with this, so I'm mainly going to focus in this area that's very much in focus and detailed, and I'm going to keep this section here quite soft, so kind of as it is. So just pulling out some of these little dots and different sort of surface textures along the branch. And because the tooth of the paper is completely squashed down, and because we've added quite a few layers, this should work really well. It always works better when, you know, you've got a lot of layers. That pigment just tends to slide off the paper a lot easier. So just creating some extra little textures and like ridges along the surface. Really fine lines using the pointy part of the ceramic blade. So yeah, I think I'm happy with how that's looking. So just to get that even more kind of blurred out of focus effect to this part of the branch, what I'm going to do is go back in with the Buff Titanium Luminance pencil, which is what we used right at the start as the first base layer. And just along this bottom edge, you want to go kind of over that very, very outer edge to kind of like blend it out a little bit. It kind of smudges it into the rest of the paper, so that line along the bottom isn't as crisp, and it starts to give like a blurry effect. And you can also do the same thing above as well, even though that is quite pale anyway. And then just back in briefly with the craft knife slice tool just to brighten up this top bit of the branch here. And then I think we're pretty much done with the branch. And I think I might leave part 5 as the branch and then part 6 do the feet. So I've just turned my drawing round again so it's the right way up. So this is what the branch is looking like. I am really happy with how that's turned out. We've got, you know, details around here and then it gets a lot softer at the top. So I think I'm going to leave that there for part 5, and then in part 6 we'll just keep it quite short and focus on these little feet, and then all we've got left to do after that is the tail. So we're getting there. So thank you for watching part 5 of this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been another different texture to draw than feathers, so hopefully you've enjoyed it, and you know, it's a chance to draw something different as well. As usual, I've left the full materials list, the line drawing and the reference photo in the video description below, so you should have everything that you need to carry on with this tutorial. If you've got any questions, then do let me know by commenting below. And yeah, I'll be back very shortly with part 6 where we'll be drawing in those little feet.